okay this week. I still, obviously, maybe your listeners don't know that I have lung cancer. So when I do chemo, which I'm still doing, it makes me really sick. But this week I didn't do any, so that's why I feel good today. So yeah, I'm having a really hard time, to tell you the truth. And the saddest thing is that the doctor said they don't know if or when I'll be able to sing again. So that makes me sad because I have a country band that I put together and I was really enjoying that. So we'll see what happens, Brian. But I'm worried and I don't feel great, but I'm here and I'm trying and it'll be okay.
When was the last time you were able to actually sing in front of people?
That was in August. I did my last show. And then right after the show, I found out that I had cancer. So it was sad because I had a bunch of shows planned and I had gotten a residency at this country and western place that's nearby that's really cool. So I was just really happy. Everything was going my way. And then all of a sudden, the rug got pulled out. But that happens to people, and that's just the way it goes, and I understand that.
At that point, it was doctor's orders to just not sing anymore, or was it more an issue of having to sort of perform and be on the road?
No, it was doctor's orders because my next show was 3 weeks after that the last show. And during that 3 weeks, I had to get a surgery because as soon as they said you have cancer, it was like, you have to have a surgery immediately. And then everything is immediately, the radiation, the chemo and all that stuff. So, I mean, I'm glad that they were able to do everything immediately. But yeah, that's the reason why I couldn't do anything after that, is because they said we have to start this stuff.
Not that there's ever a good time to find out, but, it's a shame that you weren't aware that your last performance for a while was going to be your last performance for a while.
I know. I had no idea because I had no symptoms. And my doctor just said, have you ever had a lung cancer screening? And I said, no. And then she said, well, I think you should get one. And I did. And then it came out positive and it just shocked the heck out of me.
Yeah. Geez. I mean, if I can ask, I think these sorts of conversations are useful for people who,
Yeah, I don't mind talking about it. Yeah.
You didn't have any symptoms.
No.
Did your doctor see something, or this was just a routine screening?
It was a routine screening, but to tell you the truth, like a few months before I had the screening, I was getting short of breath, and they gave me a breath test and said that I had the beginnings of emphysema, COPD. So that's all I thought I had. And then then I had been given an inhaler for that, and the inhaler worked fine. So if ever I was, getting short of breath, I would just do this inhaler and it was fine. So yeah, it was sort of out of the blue that she said, you know what, you should do this test. But really, I think she saved my life because the tumor in my lung has not spread. And it's very aggressive, they said, the type of tumor it is. And so, had we waited much longer, it would have spread and I'd be in real trouble, So for all the bad luck, the good luck far outweighs it,
Things like this definitely put things into perspective. Obviously, the best luck of all is not having to deal with this. But, at a certain point when you're going through it, you do recognize that things absolutely could be worse.
Absolutely. And if anybody out there is listening who has cancer or has a friend or a relative that has cancer, we all are aware that nowadays they have so many new drugs and different things that they didn't used to have, so that, there's a lot of help out there to keep people living longer. And another thing, since we're doing this and people are listening, and if anyone has cancer, something that really helps me is music. So if I'm really having a bad time, I'll just lie down and put on some of my favorite records, and that really helps. And so since we're doing a musical show, I would say to anybody, music can help you through the worst of times. And that's one of the really great things about music.
Nothing of this magnitude at all, but I was dealing with some health things, and then, it's just some standard depression during the pandemic. And it really that's what finally brought me around. I got to a point for a long time where I just couldn't listen to music.
I had depression during that too. Yeah, I know. And then all of a sudden, things turned around, and I found that listening to music, especially really loud, I'm lucky because where I live, I don't have any neighbors, so I can play stuff loud. But yeah, music helped me through that pandemic. That's for sure. That is for sure. But I'm sorry you went through depression. So did I. I think a lot of people did, don't you?
Oh yeah. I say that knowing that I'm absolutely not unique. What was the overall experience of the last 4 years like for you?
So I live in the desert now. I moved from Los Angeles, where I'm from San Francisco. Then I moved to Los Angeles for 21 years. Then I retired and moved back to San Francisco and found that it was too expensive and too sort of run down and not the city that I had grown to love. So then I said, where am I going to go? And then I decided to move to the desert, and, not to the dentist. And I'm glad I live out here because it's really beautiful. There's mountains, palm trees, really beautiful things to look at. So all during the pandemic, I took a walk every single day to keep myself mentally okay. And then since the pandemic, I music helped me because I put a band together, and rehearsing is the most fun I ever have. I'm one of those people that loves to rehearse because there's no pressure. I get to sing for hours. I'm laughing and having fun. So the music really, really helped. I had a lot of issues. One of my brothers died from cancer, and during that time, and so there's a lot of things that weren't so great, but I got through them just like one does. And so everything was going well until now. But I'm also happy to be in the desert and be sick, because if I was living in Los Angeles or San Francisco, I wouldn't get the kind of health care that I'm getting out here. The desert is full of old, rich people, myself not included. I'm old, but not rich. But so there's a lot of good doctors. And there's all my doctors and everyone who's taking care of me have just been fantastic. And it wouldn't be that way if I was living in the city. It'd be a lot harder. I'd have to travel farther. I'd have to deal with a lot more people. I'm lucky that I'm out here.
A lot of what you just said resonated with me. I'm actually, I live in New York now, but I'm from Fremont originally. So, obviously spent a lot of time in San Francisco, and I go back fairly frequently for work and family. And it's hard. It's hard to see.
It is hard to see. It made me so depressed. And I couldn't believe how I feel sorry for homeless people just like everyone does, but they have taken over that city, and it's filthy, and it's not nice. It's not good. It made me sad because San Francisco is so beautiful.
It is.
And not anymore. Hopefully they'll do a turnaround. I'm not sure when that'll happen or how.
I'm in New York, and I've been here for close to 20 years. And when I first moved here, there were all these, there ends up being this sort of strange nostalgia for New York back in, the kind of the grimy, the 70s and the 80s. And I think these things are cyclical. San Francisco is a wonderful, beautiful, magical place. So, I think that it certainly has the power to change. But there is a strange thing, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this in your life, of having nostalgia for a time when things were like perhaps markedly worse for you.
Oh, of course I have nostalgia for old times, especially because we're talking about an album that I made 44 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had the most fun I've ever had in my life. So, yeah, I long for the old days when I was having a ball. But I also am very thankful that, my whole life I've lived in great places and had a lot of fun, and I can't complain about anything. But I long for the good old days. Sometimes one mustn't dwell on the old days. I know that.
We forget the bad side of things, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the grass is always greener, and
absolutely.
when you leave someplace, you forget about the bad and you only remember the good stuff. That's nice, though. That's a good thing about
Yeah.
how the brain works, is that it does cotton on to the good stuff and tries to leave the bad stuff behind.
You've been in London, Los Angeles. Obviously, San Francisco is a smaller city, but it is a city. Did you expect to be living away from the city like this at any point?
You mean like in the desert where I am now?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, never. I never thought it'd be my cup of tea. But I'm older now. I'm pushing 70. I mean,
Mm.
not really, but yes. And after, experiencing so much hardships in different cities, it's really nice to just be calm and relaxed and have everything easy. I never thought that I would want that, but I do. I do. Especially being a single female, it's not easy. Always having to look out of your shoulder, look behind your shoulder, and just be wary of things all the time. And being out in the desert, it's very quiet and relatively safe. You can smell trouble coming a mile away. So it's not like living in the city. Los Angeles was tougher than San Francisco, really,
Mm.
as far as crime and all that stuff goes. But no, I never ever thought that I would go live in the desert. But I'm happy to be here, and I don't think I'll move.
Those times that I've been in the desert, especially, I'm guessing based on this conversation that you're somewhere in California still, perhaps
Oh
Southern
yes,
California.
yes, Southern
Yeah.
California, Coachella Valley.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Palm
Palm
Springs.
Springs. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's something I've never been able to put my finger on it, and maybe you can explain this to me. But I had for various reasons, spent some time in the Nevada desert and down in
Mhm.
Southern California. And there's something. I know this word gets.
Magical.
I was gonna say this word gets used
I
a lot,
hate
but there
that
is
word,
something.
but when I moved
But
here,
it's
I
true,
said,
right?
it's true. I said, I hate this word magical, but the desert is magical. I don't know why. I mean, Southern California desert is all Native American territory, and I can feel that. And Palm
Mhm.
Springs is all Native American land. And where I live right. There's mountains everywhere, so the mountains are right behind me. I see them every day. I walk my dog in the desert every day. I look at palm trees every day. And it makes me, and I know this is really corny, but it makes me say prayers of thanks every day. And I never used to be like that, but you can just feel all this stuff. And just looking at it and being there, and you can feel in your heart that a whole lot of stuff has happened in this space. And a Native American vibes, or whatever you call them,
Yeah.
all around, and they're really strong and they're really beautiful. And if you try to get in tune with them, you have a better life. I think this is what I've learned, and
Would
I like that.
Would you say that as you've gotten older that you've become a more spiritual person?
Yeah, because I have a lot to be thankful for. Like I said, I'm 69, so I'll be 70 in a year, and I never thought I would get to live to be this old. Being a
Mm.
rock and roller. I mean, I
Hmm.
never was a drug addict or anything like that, but touring all the time and doing crazy things and getting drunk and blah blah blah.
And you see a lot of people your age dropping like flies sometimes in that scene. So
Absolutely. Yes. And I mean, I know you can't see me because my computer's broken, but if you look on Instagram, you can see what I'm like and what my life is like. And I still feel like a kid because, you know, they say you're always a kid until you have one, and I never had. So I still, yeah, I feel young out here, and I just feel young at heart and really sort of thankful for all that. And so, yes, I do say my prayers of thanks, whereas when I was young, I was always too busy and too worried about all the wrong things and stuff like that, as young people do.
yeah.
You know?
In terms of being grateful and being thankful, is there a sense in which that's a direct result of watching your brother go through what he went through and then going through a version of it yourself?
Not really. Yes and no. I mean, today I say I will be thankful because, I mean, my cancer so far is not terminal. I'll knock on wood, which is my head. I mean, I saw my mother die of cancer. Two of my brothers die of cancer. My father and other of my brothers had cancer, but they didn't die from it. So I have come from a big family, and every single person has had cancer. So there's three of us left, and but the thankfulness mostly comes from just being happy to be alive and to have so many nice friends and to have a nice place to live. I mean, I don't have a lot of money or anything like that, but money certainly doesn't buy you happiness. I've learned that very well, not through experience, but from watching other people, because I've never been rich, but I certainly have always had, you know, I've always had to work and not, except a few times, you know, like when I was on Warner Brothers and when I was in London, I didn't have to have a job. I was just doing music. But yeah, I'm just thankful for all the things that I have, because I see so many people who do not have the life that I have.
This actually gets right back to what we were talking about before about forgetting some of the, you know, the negative things that happened at the time. And listening to this record now, it, you know, it's recently been, I think as we're recording this, it was reissued last month. It sounds like an incredible experience. You know, you're surrounded by all of these amazing musicians from great bands at the time, but it also sounds like Warner Brothers, this major label that you're on, in spite of everything, didn't give you the support you needed.
No, they were really mad at me, and I can understand it in a way, but they, you know, I was in my 20s and I was a real rebel, and I was not about to do anything I didn't want to do. I'm still like that. I've never changed. I won't do anything I don't want to do. People are, you know, say if you did this, you would make more money, or if you covered this song, or if you wore these clothes, or if you did this or did that. I'm not interested in any of those things. I'm interested in playing and making music on my terms. And so when I was in London, I, you know, did meet all these great people, but it wasn't because of Warner Brothers. It was because of Cosmo Vinyl. Cosmo is a guy who was the personal manager of The Clash and Ian Dury and the Blockheads. Well, I met Cosmo in San Francisco when Ian Dury and the Blockheads were rehearsing in the same rehearsal studio that I was in. And so I met this crazy guy with purple hair in the hallway, and he said, you know, "You're the second most beautiful girl I've seen today." And I was like, "Oh, who is this nut?"
Did you ask who the first was?
No, I just said, get out of here, or whatever I said. And then he said, "You want to see the best rock and roll bands in the world?" And I was like, "Oh, brother." I said, "Who's that?" And he said, "Ever heard of Ian Dury and the Blockheads?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "Oh my God, are you Ian Dury?" Because our band had played with Elvis Costello in the Attractions. And it was Elvis's first tour. And so I became friends with them because they stayed in San Francisco for a couple of weeks rehearsing and all that kind of stuff. So I got to know those folks, and I showed them around, and they told me about Stiff Records, and they told me about Nick Lowe and Ian Jury and Graham Parker and all these wonderful people, Reckless Eric. So I was aware of them all, and so so when he said Ian Jury, I was like, I said, oh my gosh. So I went and saw some of their rehearsal, and it was phenomenal. I mean, those guys were great. And so the next thing I knew, I became friends with Cosmo, and then we started dating. And then I went on some of the tours with Ian Jury and the Blockheads. And then he introduced me to the Clash. And during all this time, this was 77, 78, 79. So in 78, I had Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, and we signed to Warner Brothers and made this album and did all this touring. And Cosmo knew I wasn't happy with that band because I didn't like the kind of music that we made. There's three people who liked jazz fusion against me, who hates jazz fusion. And so, these guys would present me with music and say, write lyrics to this. And it was hard because I didn't like the music. So Cosmo said, why don't you move to London, and I can, and Ian and the Blockheads and the Clash will back you up. And I was like, nah. he said, yeah, they really like you. So sure.
The two best bands in the world are going to back you up.
I know. And it happened. I moved to London as soon as the Pearl Harbor and the Explosions tour finished. The tour with the Explosions was fun because we were the support act for the Talking Heads, and I love the Talking Heads, so that was fun. But then, leaving San Francisco and leaving, my band and going to London was really scary. But right away, he hooked me up with the Clash and the Blockheads, and I just had a blast. And Warner Brothers were mad at me because they spent a fortune on Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, and then I quit the band and moved to London. They were like, oh my gosh, because they were ready to really, make Pearl Harbor and the Explosions a really big deal. And so when I handed them Don't Follow Me, I'm Lost Too, they hated it. It's nutty, speeded up rockabilly, it's this, it's that, it's not commercial. As they said, it has no hits. And then
in 1980, I'm sure no one had any idea, even like pre-Brian Setzer, no one had any idea what to do with anything remotely rockabilly.
Exactly. But the Brits were really cool because like the British Warner Brothers, they liked it. And there was a small rockabilly scene that was happening in London because the Teddy Boy scene, the Teddy Boy scene didn't really ever go away, but it was not that popular. So when I went there, and Nigel Dixon had a band, he was my rhythm guitar player and my songwriting partner, and Cosmo hooked me up with him. He had a rockabilly band called Whirlwind, and they were fantastic. And you go to the flea market, and there'd be all these record stalls that had a million rockabilly records I'd never heard of. It was fantastic. So yeah, and then I handed them this record that they didn't like, and then I said, and you cannot put the Clash and the Blockheads names on there, and they hit the roof, and they were like, why not? And I was I was kind of like had this punk rock mentality, probably from hanging around with Cosmo and the Clash too, but I was afraid that this unknown American girl, because Pearl Harbor and the Explosions was not very well received in Britain. It was in the United States, but not in England. So anyways, I thought that and the British press are really cruel, and they are really tough, especially back then, and especially towards Americans. So I decided that if I put out a record and listed all the Clash and the Blockheads as the musicians, that aside from Joe Strummer and Ian Jury and they weren't on the record. But at any rate, I thought that the press would eat me up and say, oh, the only reason why anybody would listen to this record is because of the Clash and the Blockheads. So I just thought, let's just make this easy on me and not list anybody and just see if people like it. Well, that's not good business. And so the record company were mad at me and they threw me off the label. And I mean, that is sort of one regret I do have. I kind of wish that I had listed them because, I would have been given a chance and whatever. But it's just the way that I felt. I didn't want to be, this unknown person who was recording with great people, and people would just write me off as a person who lucked out because they knew these people.
I know for me during the pandemic, it was a good opportunity for me to really get, I write for a living, but then to get more into my writing. And it seems like part of the reissue of this album was you doing the liner notes. Have you found that this has been an opportunity for you to do more writing?
I'm supposed to be doing more writing. I'm supposed to be writing a book about, my life and stuff, but it's kind of it's hard for me because I'm sort of, when I'm on stage, I'm like a real, go-getter, but in real life, I'm kind of quiet and shy. And so for me to write a book about myself is really hard. I enjoy writing because I try to do it well. I find it to be hard, but who knows? Maybe in the next couple of years I will put out a book. But yeah, I didn't want to write the liner notes, right? I was like, oh God, do I really have to? But I did it, and it's okay. I'm really hard on myself about my writing, and so I always want other people to write things about me and not me write about me. But
we're talking about nostalgia, obviously. A reissue like this, and then sitting down and writing the liner notes is an opportunity to really think about things that you haven't thought about in a long time. I mean, in spite of the difficulty in writing, did you find that recollecting in that way was a positive experience for you?
Yes. I'm not really one to dwell too much on the past because it can be hard for me because it was the most fun I've ever had in my life. And obviously I was married to Paul and I had, I was very happy with him. And, so I was really happy and having so much fun. So when I was writing and thinking about this album and all the fun we had, it did make me smile and go, God, that was so much fun. But then, on the other hand, after a little while, I might frown and go, dang, I wish my life was still that fun. But whose life can be fun for their whole life? Like I said, I'm nearly 70 and I was in my 20s when I was having a ball. So I had a great time. And yes, when I reflect on things, I really do say to myself, man, I was lucky to have done all that, because a lot of people who are way more talented than me didn't get to do all that fun stuff and record with really fun people and go on tour with, the greatest rock bands ever and stuff like that. I got to play in front of, thousands of really great people because I got to be the support act to the Clash and Blockheads and whoever else, lots of great bands, Talking Heads.
That's a really incredible trio right there, I have to say.
Yeah.
Hearing you describe the story of moving to London, it reminds me a little bit, or brings to mind you also describing the experience of moving to of dropping out of school and moving to San Francisco. Would you say that you were impulsive, or that there were points in your life where you made a few impulsive decisions like that?
Yeah, that is the way that I've always lived my life. Is I will live somewhere and then all of a sudden I'll know it's time to leave. Now, in the case of moving to San Francisco from Germany, I was a bad teenager, and I, when I said to my parents, I'm moving to San Francisco and I don't care what you said, they were like, great, bye. My dad bought me an airplane ticket, and my parents said, bye. I was 17 years old, and they didn't say, oh, no, you don't. Instead, they said, go ahead and go, because I said, I want to pursue my music career. And they knew I had always wanted to be a singer, because I have always wanted to be a singer. And all four of my brothers were record collectors. And my one brother, who was 1 year older than me, he had bands when we were in high school. So, so moving to San Francisco, yeah, that was impulsive. When I left San Francisco for London, I knew it was the time for me to leave San Francisco, and I really wanted to know what it was like in London. And when I left London, that was a different experience, because I didn't want to leave London and move back to San Francisco, but Paul had broken up with me. So it was kind of like, do I want to stay in the city with my tail between my legs, or do I want to go back home where everybody will welcome me as some sort of long lost hero? And I chose that. And so, and then when I was in San Francisco for a while, in the late 90s, I said, I wonder what it's like to live in Los Angeles. So I just, packed up my bags and moved and lived there for 21 years. And then when I was sick of living there, I said, oh, I'm going to go somewhere else. So, and that's a long answer to your question, but yeah, when the spirit moves me, I do get up and go. Yeah. I don't have children, and I'm not married, and I don't have children, so I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, and I was just saying it's a great answer. And I'm curious, after this album that we're discussing now didn't work out quite like you had hoped, and then you go through this breakup after several years of marriage. Was it clear what you were going to do with your life at that point?
Yeah, I knew when I moved back to San Francisco that I would just put together another band and just keep rocking and rolling as long as I could, and that's what I've always done. I kind of don't have any choice. I have to do that. It's just who I am and what I do.
Yeah.
I've never been as successful. The most successful I ever was Pearl Harbor and the explosions. And what did I do? I left it, but I'm glad I did. Like I said, the fame and fortune part is not why I like to sing. And I've never stopped singing. I still have now. I did, but I have, like I said, I had a country band now, and I was just sad because my life in London was so fun and so good, and then it was over.
You moved to San Francisco. How does one become a tap dancing boxer or a boxing tap dancer?
Well, when I first moved to San Francisco, when I was 17, there was a few things that interested me. One was being in a rock band, and the other was dancing, because I loved dance. And so I went to this dance school, and I learned jazz, ballet, and tap. And tap dancing was not, and I don't think has ever been in fashion. But I auditioned for
not since Sammy Davis, probably, right?
Exactly. So there was a talent show by the Tubes, and the Tubes were this rock band that were fantastic, and they had it was like a rock and roll circus. They just had a million different people doing. They had a high wire act. They had just people doing all kinds of stuff on the stage. And I said, I want to be on that stage with those people. So I saw that they were having this audition talent show, and I won it by tap dancing and boxing. And I knew what the Tubes looked like, and I knew what they sounded like, and I knew what they would like. And I found out that they loved, Roxy Music and Phil Manzanera and all this stuff. So I got a Phil Manzanera song that I thought that they would like. See, I wasn't dumb, even though I was young. I kind of put everything together, and I thought these folks, like it sexy. So I had on my satin boxing shorts, and I put a bandage.
You're a sexy tap dancing boxer, a sexy glam rock tap dancing boxer.
Yeah, with big hair and eye makeup and all that stuff, and I had a cape with pearl written in glitter on the back. And it was funny, but at the same time, it was right up their alley. So I kind of knew what I was doing, even though I was a kid.
It's so wild, looking at your history about how from there everything is kind of a straight line, like how getting in with that group just set up your entire music career. It seems
it did. Everything did fall into place, and nothing was planned. And I just followed my nose. Like when I was in the Tubes, there was a girl, a lady, Leela, and she had a band called Leela and the Snakes, and it was all girl band. And she asked me to join that. And then when I joined that, then I learned a lot about performing. And then I said, I want to have my own band. And then I took eventually she had boys in the band too. And they were the Haynes brothers, were the rhythm section for Pearl Harbor and the Explosions, but I took them with me. Yeah. So, and then Pearl Harbor and the Explosions led to me meeting Cosmo and going to London. Yeah. So everything happened like that. And I didn't plan any of it. I'm just really lucky that all that stuff happened to me.
Speaking of luck and things falling into place, you have a story of perhaps one of the luckiest flea market finds of all time that aligns as a perfect cross section of my interests in flea markets, nudie suits, and the Doobie Brothers.
How do you know these things?
Well, this one I found out by reading an interview, but I'm that has been a dream of mine to get a nudie suit. And I had Michael McDonald on the show a few years ago, so I'm a genuine fan of theirs. So it's just this like, you hear these stories. A few years ago, there's a story about somebody who found a copy of the first Velvet Underground acetate for $2. And
wow,
this to me, this isn't quite Velvet Underground acetate, but a Doobie Brothers own nudie suit is up there for me.
I know. And I didn't buy that. My brother, who passed away from cancer, he saw it at the flea market, and he bought it for me for my birthday. It was like $100 or something, and it's worth thousands. I still have it, and everybody wants to buy it from me. I probably should sell it now, but no, now that I don't know, Brian. No. I can't.
Here's what I'm going to tell you, Pearl, because assuming you're not in total dire straits, I think a big part of the healing process is knowing what you're going to do after it's over. And to you, it's clear that you're going to be singing country and Western music again. Yeah. And you got the outfit.
Exactly. I know I have the nudie suit, which everybody, that's as good as you can get in country music. You're right. I know. Well, we'll see what time brings, Brian. If I do well with my getting over cancer, then heck, I'm going to wear that nudie suit. And then if it comes time that it ain't happening, then we'll see what happens. But I agree with you. I should hang on to it until I know. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about how corny some things like spirituality and magic can be, and I think the idea of visualizing things can be corny as well. But I do think that if you really think about yourself on stage in that suit singing music,
yes. Other people have said that to me, and I agree 100%. That was a nice thing to say, Brian, because I agree. I do have to visualize things, and it is a corny thing to say, but visualizing a lot of times does bring stuff to you. And I don't know why or anything like that, but I am, when I'm lying around here sick, and not, feeling sorry for myself, I do visualize stuff like getting back on stage and what I'm going to wear and the jokes I'm going to tell and all that kind of stuff. And it really brings me around and makes me happy.